Everyone do me a favor and raise your left hand in the air and keep it there. What you just did is extraordinary. A strange woman, exceedingly strange woman, just walked up to the front of a room at a state university and told you to do something, and you listened immediately. On a historic scale, that's not just different, that's revolutionary. You put your hands down. Now, there are a lot of people in the world who wish you hadn't done that. People who don't like me personally because I'm the kind of woman who gets up in front of rooms and tells people what to do. People who don't like the idea of me because of what I represent to them about the changing world that they live in. People you know, people you love. People who are participating in a cultural narrative that's woven into the fabric of our society. These are the kinds of people who would like you to believe that I am just some mouthy broad who's here to boss you around. And they're not wrong. I am a mouthy broad who's here to boss you around. But you're going to listen to me, and here's why. I am a mouthy broad with dividends. I'm a mouthy broad who's been nominated for Mouthy Broad Awards. I've got 3 books on the shelves and 3 more on the way, and I'm just getting started, and I'm good enough at being a mouthy broad that your school is paying me actual money to come talk to you about the risks that come with being a mouthy broad and why it's worth it. But there are people who want you to think that I don't belong up here. And I'm not mad at them. Even though some of them have threatened my life, even though they have threatened the well-being of my family, even though some of them have said directly to me that they would like to come to my home and shoot me in the head, rather than see me continue standing up at the front of rooms like this one, telling people like you what to do. I'm not mad at them, and I'm not scared of them, because I know what they really are. They're terrified. And of course they're terrified. For millennia, Western society has insisted that female voices, just that all by itself, our voices, are a direct threat. We as people are afraid of wolves, and we're afraid of bears, and we're afraid of women. Now, the Greeks are not the first people who codified this discomfort into their mythos, but they've got a stellar example of the cultural fear of female voices. This is Odysseus. He's the titular hero of Homer's Odyssey, and in this picture, he's resisting the call of the sirens. Now, the sirens, if you don't know, are cursed women. They failed to find Demeter's daughter Persephone when she was kidnapped by Hades, the god of the underworld, and as punishment for their failure, they were trapped on an island in horrible, chimeric, half-bird forms. For the women who became sirens, the real curse was being marooned on islands, trapped for eternity, no one to talk to, nothing to do. But for the men who dared to sail too close to those islands, the curse was the sirens' voices. The voices were a curse because they could lure any sailor that heard them to the islands where those sailors would inevitably shipwreck and drown. Now, Odysseus had a plan to sail past those islands. He commanded his sailors to plug their ears with beeswax and cotton, told them to lash him to the mast, and don't release him no matter what he says or does. He didn't have any earplugs in himself because he wanted to see if he could sail past the island and hear the siren song. He wanted to see if he could resist the pull. But when he heard that song, Odysseus, who was a hero on a literally epic scale, was tempted. He was so tempted that the only thing that kept him from commanding his sailors to change course and sail to their deaths was the fact that he had planned in advance for them to be unable to hear his commands. This story is a great summary of cultural fear of women. In a society where men hold the power, the most powerful thing a woman can do is have influence over those men. The idea of a member of an oppressed class influencing the powerful is fundamentally threatening to the existing order of society because it puts some degree of power into the hands of those oppressed people. So when the sirens sing, and Odysseus can't resist being drawn in by their song, the reader sees an epic hero displaying a rare weakness. These women are so powerful and so dangerous that they can bring down a figure as important as Odysseus. This is just one small example of a pervasive section and theme in Greek mythology. Sirens themselves appear in several different stories in Greek myth, and those stories all reflect and reinforce our societal terror of the influence of women on powerful men. Now, starting in the 4th century, siren mythos began to be subsumed by Christian writers and turned into allegory. Saint Isidore of Seville was an archbishop for 30 years and is often called the last father of the Christian church. And he wrote about sirens in his Etymology, which was intended to be a collection of all human knowledge that had ever been and ever would be. In that book, he supposes that siren mythos is actually an exaggerated accounting of the lives of Sicilian prostitutes. St. Isidore wrote that those women presented such temptation to travelers that they would bankrupt them, causing their innocent victims to drown in the pleasures of the flesh. After St. Isidore, Christian art through the Renaissance period continued using sirens as a metaphor for temptation and ruin. Those sirens are often depicted as human-fish hybrids, hence our contemporary conflation of mermaids and sirens, from half-bird to half-fish. During the Renaissance, the Jesuit writer Cornelius a Lapide interacted with this by describing all women as siren-like temptations when he said, and I quote, "With her voice she enchants, with her beauty she deprives of reason, voice and sight alike deal destruction and death." Initially, siren mythos reflected an existing fear of the female potential to tempt and ruin powerful men, but over the course of centuries, their story grew into a tool to reinforce that fear. Sirens grow from a few sisters stranded on an island by a curse, to a working class of Sicilian prostitutes, to all women. When Lapide wrote that voice and sight alike deal destruction and death, he was speaking into a fear that stretches all the way back to the Eden narrative, a fear that listening to a woman is a mortal error. In 1837, a man by the name of Hans Christian Andersen attempted to defang that developing siren narrative by writing a story called Den Lille Havfru, which you may know better as The Little Mermaid. The original story, as our buddy Hans wrote it, is a Christian fairy tale about a virtuous siren. His story is about an unnamed young mermaid who wants nothing in the world so much as a human soul, so that when she dies, that soul can live forever in the kingdom of God. She goes to a sea witch who gives her a potion that will grant her legs. She can use those legs to go up on land and seduce herself a prince. Now, the deal is simple. She marries the prince before 3 days are up. She'll get a portion of his soul for herself, and she'll be practically human. All she has to give up is her tongue and her voice. At the end of that original story, she doesn't actually get her prince. He's going to marry someone else, and the little mermaid is going to turn into sea foam as mermaids do when they die. Her sisters, sirens always have sisters, make their own enormous sacrifices to get their hands on a knife from the sea witch. They're going to give the little mermaid the knife. She will kill the prince, sprinkle the blood on her legs will turn back into a tail, and she will get to return to the ocean, live for the requisite 300 years that mermaids get. But she is virtuous, and she says no and dies. Her reward for her enormous sacrifice and display of virtue is that she's trapped in purgatory for 300 years with the promise that if she does enough good deeds during that time, she'll get a soul and go to heaven. And note that the overarching theme of the original story, Den Lille Havfru, is not love. Marriage is a factor, but it's secondary. It's a means to an end. What the Little Mermaid really wants, what she sacrifices everything to get, is a soul. The way for her to get that soul is silence. She has to give up her voice, and she has to endure agonizing pain, and she has to reject the company of her sisters and family, all just to get to purgatory, where she has to undergo the same additional purification that thieves do in order to have a soul. Her existing identity as a woman who wants things and can speak to that want is a moral obstacle to be overcome. Her only shot at redemption comes via silence and death. Now, this isn't a new concept. 200 years before Hans redeemed the siren by cutting out her tongue, a guy named Thomas Wilson wrote the first English text on rhetoric. In it, he asks, What becometh a woman best and first of all? Silence. What second silence, what third silence, what fourth silence, yea, though a man would ask me unto doomsday, I would answer still silence, without which no woman hath any good gifts. But it's not an old concept either. This didn't end with Din Le Havre. Women in contemporary media face an overwhelming and constant demand for silence. You can trace these explicit objections to female voices through the golden age of radio. During that era, radio personalities were overwhelmingly male. But then we went to war with the entire world, and the men went off to die, and the women took over their jobs. But women who tried to break into radio were considered unbroadcastable. Their voices were criticized as shrill and grating. They were called high and breathy and irritating. Now, those voices were high and breathy at the time because they were required by the society they lived in to wear corsets and later tight girdles. Those undergarments kept them from being able to speak from their diaphragms, and the result was a voice we currently affiliate with a young Queen Elizabeth, slightly breathless and high and airy. Their voices were criticized as lacking gravity, when in reality they were lacking in air, because the culture of the day demanded that they suffocate. This wasn't just for fashion. Medical professionals at the time insisted that corsetry was necessary for female health, which left women with a choice between silence and survival. But today, women are more present in broadcasting and media, but we're still subject to consistent criticism focusing solely on the way our voices sound. We're not called shrill as often anymore, but the primary focus of contemporary criticism of women in broadcasting is the use of something called glottal fry, sometimes known as vocal fry. This is a distortion of the voice, which is the result of attempting to speak in a low register without proper breath support. It sounds kind of like this. You've heard this. It's come to be closely affiliated with stereotypes of vapid, thoughtless women, when in reality, it's a vocal tic that reflects a woman's attempt to speak in a voice that is deeper and thus more masculine and thus more authoritative. It doesn't matter if I'm speaking in my natural register or if I'm trying to reach for a lower register in order to get people to believe that I know what I'm talking about. Women in roles which focus on speech cannot win. This was summarized most concisely by the Daily Express in 1928, which described female radio voices as universally unbearable, when they said, "Her high notes are sharp and resemble the filing of steel, while her low notes often sound like groans." The her that they are referring to in this is all women. The same discomfort with female speech extends into online spaces, where an entire culture of harassment against women has become an embedded part of the experience of being a woman in a position of high visibility. These harassment campaigns are global and insidious. They target women who disobey Thomas Wilson's edict about good gifts. They include explicit threats of violence, rape, and murder. They target women ranging from actresses like Leslie Jones, who starred in Ghostbusters and dared to go on a publicity tour, to politicians like Jo Cox, a British Labour Party MP who was shot and stabbed to death in response to her advocacy for Syrian refugees, to feminist media critics like Anita Sarkeesian. She had to cancel an October 2014 speaking engagement due to the volume of threats leveled against her and the university that had invited her to speak to its students. These threats included the usual bog standard promises of rape, murder, and violence, but they extended into threats of mass murder and terrorism. One of these threats promised that a Montreal massacre-style attack would be carried out against the attendees as well as the students and staff at the nearby Women's Center. The university that she was supposed to speak at, as you probably recall, was Utah State University. The historic and contemporary demand for female silence stems directly from fear of what women's voices can do. If women can speak to each other and to the world at large, the ideas of women threaten to influence and shape society from the top down, in the same way that men's voices have for centuries. This fear, the fear that women will influence men and the fear that they will influence culture on social and political levels, is pervasive and leads directly to violence. So what do we do? What's the solution? It's right here. I'm standing up here doing something that for centuries women have been told we must not do. I'm speaking. And you are doing something that for centuries has been considered anathema, has been considered the worst mistake you can make, has been considered the thing that will surely kill you. You're listening. Keep doing that. Regardless of who you are or what you believe or your gender identity or your politics, listen. And keep listening. Listen when it's uncomfortable. Listen when it makes you question the things you assume to be true about your life and the world you live in. Find ways to amplify the voices of women who are speaking. And if you're a woman who has been afraid to speak, you have two options. Option one, you can be silent. You can shut up. You can let the history of fear and violence quiet you. You can give in to those people who would prefer to see people like me in the ground rather than seeing me continue to work. You can do that. It won't make those people who want to see me in the ground change the way they treat people who look and sound just like you. And it won't make you feel any less scared. And it won't satisfy their anger or their fear. But it's an option. Option two, you can do what I'm doing right now. You can be everything that those scared people don't want you to be. You can be outspoken and opinionated and confident and mouthy. You can use your mind and your voice to change the way that people think, so there's less fear and less hatred and less violence and less murder. You can be exactly as powerful as they are afraid you can be. And you can use that power to make the world safer for other women who are afraid to speak. You can be a siren. Your voice has power. Use it. Thank you.